Sure. So I got started in publicity. I was on the vendor side, so I worked at a marketing agency who had all entertainment studios as clients. So there I worked with Warner Brothers, with Netflix, with ABC, with Disney, basically everyone. So that's kind of how I got started within the industry, was on the entertainment side, and then or on the agency side, and obviously now I'm on the studio side. So yeah.
I can go next. Yeah. So for me, I came to LA as part of the Page program. I don't know if we have any 30 Rock viewers on there. Shout out Kenneth the Page. I was one of them. I wore the suit. I wore the peacock pin. That was me. And I think I always wanted to be a storyteller. Being in the Page program kind of helped me prove to myself that I could be that, but that I could also tell stories through data too. And that's what marketing is from day to day. I've gone to a couple of different fun places. I've had a funny little jaunt here in LA. I was at Time Inc., working with Sports Illustrated, People Magazine, and InStyle. I worked at Hulu for a little bit. I worked at Refinery 29 for a little bit, and obviously I'm at CBS now. So working with a couple of different publishers and seeing a couple of things has been it's been really funny. It's been a funny life.
Yeah, I'll go last. Hi, everyone. David Yen from Lionsgate. I think I actually recognize a few of you from the last panel I did a couple months ago, but happy to see everyone here, new faces and old. So what made me want to pursue a career in entertainment? I'll be honest, it was just one of those things where I was like, that sounds interesting. And, I started not really understanding what kind of jobs were available. I knew that I was just sadly not a creative person, but I wanted to work in an industry that I found interest in my day-to-day life, right? And so, I kind of entered the entertainment industry with sort of wide eyes and just wanted to understand what the opportunities were, and sort of ended up here 11 years later at the same company that I started at Lionsgate, now head of business strategy and planning. But that's how I kind of got my start. I started off, my first job at Lionsgate was as an analyst in sort of a participations accounting group. Not the most fun job, but definitely a place you can learn a lot about how the business works, about how cast and talent and producing and all of the business aspects of it go into making a film, and was able to sort of leverage and take advantage of the fact that Lionsgate was back then a very, very small company, and sort of move around and learn a lot. And so, it's sort of led me here today, but we can dig into that in a second.
Amazing. Thanks for giving us some background into who you guys are and why you do what you do. Next, we wanted to ask you what exactly your role does and also what your day-to-day entails. And again, this is open to everyone.
I can go first again. So I'm in the international digital marketing department. On the film side at Paramount, we do have TV also. But what that means is I manage international digital campaigns for all of the territories that distribute our films outside of the US and Canada. So I work with about 70 plus different markets around the world on everything that has to do with online or digital. So everything from like AV, so like any kind of audiovisual trailer cut down, the fun clips that you might see on Instagram. I work on AR filters, so again with Instagram or even Snapchat, anything that you use there. Your like GIFs, your memes, your Instagram stickers, all of your social graphics, anytime we work with influencers, whether it's we bring them to a red carpet premiere or we have them create some kind of custom content for their channels. We work on any kind of advertising. So any kind of like website takeovers, media banners, media partnerships. So if we're doing like a TikTok challenge or we're doing some kind of Twitch integration, and then from there, I oversee content launches across all platforms. So all of your normal ones like Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, etc. And then our international channels as well. So we have VK in Russia, there's Douyin and Weibo in China, Naver, Kakao in Korea, Line in Japan. And so it's really fun because I get to tap into all of the local nuances that different territories might have for their campaigns. And work with them to have global marketing campaigns for our movies. Yeah.
Cool. So for me, I'm on the integrated marketing side. So a lot of that is working with sponsors and working with brands and working with clients from day to day to make sure that their experience across all of our content is going to be as seamless as possible. I don't know if Wayne's World is dating me too much, but if you think about the scene with Garth from that, where he's got a bunch of different brands on there, that's the example that we try to avoid. We want to make it nice and simple, nice and easy. In terms of the content that I actually work on from day to day, I work across all of CMV. So Entertainment Tonight, I work with the Drew Barrymore Show. I work with Dr. Phil as well, Rachel Ray, Inside Edition. But I also work on Paramount Plus. So a little bit of Star Trek, a little bit of Why Women Kill. RIP Twilight Zone, I was working on them for a little bit too. So working with all those different brands and working with different personalities is that's really my day today, and making sure that we sell out, but not too much. And in terms of the back end, I work on media plans as well. And that's the analytical aspect I was talking about a little bit earlier. So understanding the nuts and bolts of projections of what shows are going to look like, and how many viewers we're going to get from day to day. That's a conversation that I have to have too, because obviously we want every show to launch well and for a billion people to see them, but sometimes a show sucks, and you have to adjust as you need to, and you adjust as is necessary for every client. And that's it for me.
Yeah, so my job is really split. I oversee two groups. One group is the content analysis group. So that is the group for the motion, and this is all specifically for the film group, just to be clear. So that the content analysis group is the group that does all the projections for our green lights for films. So you hear about how films get greenlit at a company. Part of that is a financial analysis of the projections of what we think we could make or lose on the film. And so that ranges all the way from our bigger films like a John Wick or a Hunger Games or Spiral that we have coming out this weekend, all the way through some direct to VOD releases that we have that you can find on iTunes or Amazon, or if you have a cable top box, although that's a very specific audience that I don't think is on this panel or attending this panel today. And then on the other side, I oversee the financial planning and analysis for the motion picture group. So that is our 3-year strategic outlook as a whole business. Where should we be leaning into in terms of investments? Where are opportunities for growth? And what does that look like? And all the way down to working on our board deck, right? Or our board presentations. So, my day-to-day, I'm just thinking about today with back-to-back meetings all day. On one end, we are developing our story for the board presentation that we have coming up in 2 or 3 weeks. We are capping off a very tumultuous year, I think, for the entertainment industry. So there's a lot of recap. It's also our fiscal year end. So there's a lot of sort of recapping and outward looking that we're doing right now. On the other end, we are working with our producers on some of our upcoming films on getting these films released, right? No films are going through as big theatrical as they were. So every film sort of has their own release strategy. So really working with the different teams, distribution, marketing, sales, as well as communication to our producers and talent to make sure everyone's on the same page, everyone knows what the plan is, what the projections are, and how we're going to get this thing shipped off. But yeah, that's really my day-to-day.
Great, thank you so much, guys. It's definitely great listening to how not only are you working within the exterior, but also kind of the operations and the logistics behind it. So that's very interesting to hear. And so thank you so much for that. Going off of that, I just wanted to ask for each and one of you guys what your toughest aspect of the job is, but also in retrospect, what your favorite part is. And maybe we could have David go first this time.
Sure. So, interestingly, I was thinking about this. I think the toughest part of the job is also on a grass is greener or glass half full way is also my favorite part of the job. I think it is my group specifically sort of sits at the intersection of the corporate part of the company and the creative part of the company. And that is a balance that is very hard to strike, right? They often are at odds with each other, right? A film that may not seem like a good piece of investment, the creative team is incredibly passionate about, the corporate team's on us about, use of capital and having limited capital, et cetera, right? And trying to strike that balance between the right release date for a movie and what's good for the fiscal year, right? And stuff like that, because it definitely all has implications. I think on the glass half full side, it is also the favorite part of my job. It is sitting right between somewhere where I'm not too far on one end or the other, and I get to talk to many different types of people, in many different departments, and really kind of serve multiple portions of the company through what we do. That is a balance I'm looking for. I think, honestly, if I worked in the complete corporate side, it would feel so detached from the product, right, that I wouldn't even really feel like I'm working at a film studio. And I just know, if I try to give notes on a script, it's not going to work out. So that's just not me, and never been who I am. So it's finding that sort of sweet spot for myself within this job.
I would say for me, I think that I'll start with my favorite part of the job. And, I didn't come here to come to this industry to work in numbers. Like I said, I wanted to be a storyteller. I wanted to entertain. So that's my favorite part, coming up with the different ideas from day to day and working with different talent. I worked on a remote fashion show last year for Refinery 29, which is something that I don't think that I could have ever done in any other context. So doing that and working with influencers, working with talent to ultimately entertain people and make people happy, especially in a time like the one that we're living. That is a real treat from day to day. When you're working hard on something like that, you're hardly working. But in terms of the flip side of that, the hardest part of it is, living within the restrictions and the guidelines that you have from day to day. It's not like working in The Sims where you can put in a cheat code for unlimited money or anything along those lines. You have to, adhere to the amount of cash that you have from day to day. You have to adhere to legal restrictions. You have to adhere to beef between people. Like I've talked a little bit about some of the talent that I've worked on. Like for Rachel Ray, she hates XYZ amount of talent. So working on that sort of stuff, shout out Jay, love that. I think that, having to reconcile those sorts of things, it's something that you have to just deal with. And if it doesn't work with your idea, that's really hard. It's heartbreaking when people don't get along.
I definitely know what you mean about talent. But I would say the hardest part of my job for me is being able to cater to multiple markets. Obviously, something that works in APAC may not work in EMEA. And also just understanding nuances, like I mentioned before, like, in Japan, while it may sound really cheesy, they do like any kind of assets that are like kawaii or super cute. Or flip it to France. I'm working on the next iteration of Scream, and I don't know if you guys have seen that movie, but the bloody knife is a really big icon for that franchise. And in France, they tend to stay away from the knife iconography just because they have so many terrorist attacks there that include people being stabbed. So just one, it's like trying to remember all of that. Two, especially right now during COVID times, some countries are better off than others. Some have never opened up. Some, especially the ones in Asia, the movie theaters have been open this whole time. So remembering how things are in the rest of the world, I think is important, especially for right now, because we want to be sensitive about what kind of materials we can put out there. But on the flip side, that's also my favorite part of the job, is because it is international, and it's so cool when we get to work on one piece of content that is translated into 20 different languages, put it out in the world, and then gets millions of views. So I think it's cool just knowing how many eyes are on the content that we produce. And I mean, not for now, but before, I used to get to travel a lot too, for premieres and things like that.
Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you all for sharing a little more about what the best part and a little bit of like what the worst part of your jobs are, or like the more difficult parts. I think I definitely learned a lot because I haven't considered every aspect of these roles. And yeah, it was very insightful. The next question is specifically for Valerie and Andrew. We wanted to know if there were any specific roadblocks that made it hard for you guys to initially get into the entertainment industry.
Yeah, I mean, I can start. I don't know about you guys, but a lot of my colleagues come from schools that are based in LA. So whether it's they went to undergrad or did grad school at USC, at LMU, at Pepperdine, at UCLA. So I don't know if this was mentioned, but I went to the University of Hawaii. And so our alumni base is not necessarily the same as if you were to go to school in Southern California or even in LA. So I think one that was the main challenge is I didn't know anyone from my school that worked in entertainment. So that alone was a little bit of a hurdle. And two, it is hard, I think, for the entry level jobs to break in if you didn't do an internship at a studio and you don't have that experience. And I would say the same for other people I know that didn't go to school in LA. So while I interviewed at tons of studios, while I was still an undergrad, I think what really helped me was kind of getting my foot in the door on the vendor side, working at an agency. And I think that's a part of the business that a lot of people don't realize. But most marketing departments outsource everything. So like I'm not sitting here like, coding our ticketing websites or like on Photoshop making our graphics. We outsource it all to vendors, and they're a really big part of all of the studio's marketing campaigns. And so that's a really great way, I think, for anyone to try and break in. And it also gives you experience working with a number of different studios, so if you prefer one or the other.
Yeah, I think all great points. And I would echo most of those things for sure. And one thing that I would want to emphasize too is just like, the biggest roadblock for me was just the literal small amount of opportunities. Like I'm gonna be real, there's a finite amount of opportunities from day to day, studio over agency, over whatever. But I think that the big learning for everything is that you just got to keep applying. Something that you're gonna see is that like if you send out XYZ amount of resumes, amount of applications, I think that it ultimately only takes one pitch to hit a homer. And, the three of us up here, we all hit our home run, and, you can too.
And just to echo what Drew just said, I think the other thing, especially in entertainment, it's such a small industry. Once you're in your kind of niche. So for example, like my boss right now, she started at Sony and then went to Warner Brothers and is now at Paramount. And my boss's boss was at Disney and then went to Fox and then went to Paramount. So I would just say, it is a super small world. So if you interview somewhere and they don't necessarily take you the first time, make sure to stay connected with them, just because you never know where people will end up.
Great, thank you so much for that. I definitely have to kind of take that. I definitely have to echo that as well, because there's been many kind of articles of saying like definitely don't burn your bridges. Like even though like you may not get the interview, like or you might not get the position, but don't burn that bridge, because you never know like where you'll end up. And that kind of constant communication and is definitely important. So thank you so much for that.
And the same goes for recruiters too. Recruiters move around to the different studios also.
Of course.
Small town, guys, don't burn those bridges.
You heard it, guys. Everyone's saying don't burn those bridges. So definitely keep count of that. Thank you so much for that. And I just wanted to ask David, as you mentioned before, you have been working an impressive 11 years at Lionsgate. And so we kind of wanted just to ask, how has your experience been, and what kind of made you transition from this finance position to more of a strategy and operations within Lionsgate?
Yeah, well, one, thank you for saying that. It has been 11 years, and my entire career actually has been at Lionsgate, working full time. So it's been a long ride. I don't think I would be here if I didn't continue to enjoy working at the company, as well as did not believe. I do also believe that I am still learning every single day, even 11 years in, right? And if I felt like I wasn't learning anymore or wasn't being challenged, I probably would have moved somewhere else, right? Very quickly. I think it's been an interesting ride. Lionsgate has certainly changed quite a bit since I started here 11 years ago. So I think one of the first movies that we released when I started at Lionsgate, not even in this department, was like Tyler Perry's Why'd I Get Married To? Right. And I think 2 years in, when I actually transitioned departments into more of the greenlighting analyst role, or financial analyst in this greenlighting team, 4 months into it is when we released The Hunger Games, which was like a big bang. Lightning struck the company and we experienced this huge growth. So I was very fortunate to be at the opportunity where I was able to learn a lot, and the company was growing a lot. So I was given a lot of faith in my growth trajectory at Lionsgate as the company grew, right? And so, I don't think that I would have been able to replicate that anywhere else, so at a company that's more stagnant or more established, right? Lionsgate today, much bigger of a conglomerate, although we still are an independent studio comparatively to the other major studios out there. So there's still a lot more growth that can happen. I think for me, the transition from finance to strategy, it has been more about the growth of my role and the parts I oversee. So I think whereas I started as the junior analyst on a team of 3, I now technically oversee that same team, but now it's a team of about a dozen, right? And so again, just kind of talking towards the growth of the company and how much we've experienced over the years. We've had reorganization, we've had a lot of management change, and we've had hits and misses on our film side, right? But that sort of natural progression from analyst to sort of management that has happened sort of brings you into a more strategic focus on what your job is, right? Whereas, my job used to be very focused on individual movies and helping them get made from a creative perspective. Now it is more about the overall slate, right? And what direction we're pushing everything in and where the opportunities are and what the market's asking for. So it has been a transition for sure, both in terms of how I approach my way of thinking in terms of the industry, as well as how I approach what is now my group, right? In terms of management. So the day-to-day has certainly changed and the people I talk to have certainly changed, but I think overall at its core, it's about helping movies get made and helping them become successful.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you again for emphasizing how important growth is. I think for college students, a lot of us focus on getting to our foot in the door, getting to the position that we dream of, and we forget about how we are able to continue our careers. And I think you brought up a really good point. But on that same topic of transition, we wanted to ask you, Valerie, what was your transition like from being a senior social media account executive at ThinkJam to working at Paramount in digital marketing? And also, what are the biggest similarities and differences?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely like being on the client side more. I think when you're on the vendor side, you're definitely more hands-on and you're the one doing the work. Whereas I think now in my role, I'm a little more strategic and I have a lot more to do with planning and just general project management. So I would say that's definitely the biggest difference. I still work with ThinkJam now, actually, and with a number of different vendors. But I think before, my role was primarily based in just social media and with influencers, whereas now it's obviously expanded to anything that has to do with the media buy and websites and mobile games and things like that. So I think it's good because it's similar and it's a lot of what I did before, just on a whole different level now, and it has expanded. But again, I think having that experience of being on the vendor side before is good for me now, just because one, I know what I'm asking of my vendors when I do put in the ask, but at the same time, I can kind of smell the bullshit if they, try and push back on something. And I'm like, no, I think you can do this during my deadline. So yeah, that's kind of the plus side of it, having that background.
Thank you so much for that, Valerie. I definitely have to agree that sometimes working in that position and then being in the manager position, that kind of on the flip side, what it's like. And so if this is manageable, you definitely will, as you said, smell the bullshit. So yeah, so definitely had a whole agree with that. So
I know, but everyone in my group, when I go, isn't it easy to, and that's their worst. That's their worst nightmare.
Can't you just do this? Isn't there just a magic button you can push? I feel like that's what everyone else thinks.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, guys. So yeah, moving on, we just wanted to ask David and Andrew. So as David is a business strategy and planning at Lionsgate, and Andrew is currently an associate manager in integrated marketing. Is there a common misconception about the field that you're working, or are there any aspects of your job that surprised you? And Drew, if you wanted to get off first this time.
Yeah, no problem. I would say, off the bat, I think that there's kind of a big misconception around just sponsored stuff and commercials and whatnot, that these are just moments of inspiration that happen within an hour or within 15 minutes. I know that when I was in college, a lot of people would talk about going to the Grove or whatever and just crushing beers with friends and coming up with funny ideas. And look, there's an element of that. I'm not gonna lie, sometimes I will have a Zoom chat at like 5:30, 6 o'clock with some of my buddies at work to brainstorm things. But at the end of the day, there's so much planning that goes into everything, whether it's a, a small social media post, whether it's a, hey, brought to you by the Drew Barrymore Show. There are an unbelievable amount of conversations that go into all of these things, just because you have to be as tailored as possible when it comes to all of your clients, all of your brands. I'm fortunate enough, and I think that everyone on the call too can relate to be working with some pretty big budgets right now. But when I was working with like local clients at Hulu, when people were coming to me with like $5,000, every penny counts, right? So when you have cash like that, you want to make it stretch as long as you can and be as efficient as possible. So sometimes it's 2 or 3 months working on a 6-second spot. And you got to respect the homework when it comes to sorts of things like that.
Yeah, I think for me, it's funny because I was thinking about this. I don't know if many people are aware that a job like mine exists, right? So I'm not sure if there are too many misconceptions. I think one thing we sort of hit all the time is people think that the projections that my group comes up with in terms of a financial analysis are set in stone. This is exactly what's going to happen, right? And that we have some sort of crystal ball in terms of box office. I mean, listen, if someone had figured out, or someone had that crystal ball, or this was all based on an algorithm, there wouldn't be these like big miss movies out in the marketplace that you've heard of, right? I think the one thing I say all the time about every single piece of paper my group puts out, because it is always forward-looking, is that every single one of these numbers will be off, right? And there's no way we're hitting this to the dollar or even to the million, right? And so just understanding that it is a projection, and that it is a guiding post, but not a fortune telling piece of paper, right? And there is a mix of art to it. Some of the films that seem like the biggest risks for us are our biggest hits, and some of the ones that seemed like such straight down the middle, films that were so straight down the middle are our biggest flops, right? And so it really just depends. There's so many different ingredients that go into the making and releasing of a film, that it is not as simple as sort of just taking box office on day one and like how much you think the movie cost, right? And so yeah, and just like Drew said before, the incredible amount of planning that goes into everything, you would be surprised by, I think. Yeah.
Thank you so much for that, guys. It was definitely great to hear about kind of the common misconceptions, but also kind of the aspects of the job that also surprised you as well. Moving on, I just had one quick question for Drew. So we noticed, looking at your profile, that you were part of the PAGE program at NBC, which is, for those who don't know, a 12 to 15-month rotational learning and development program. How would you say that this kind of working within this program has helped you with your future roles since then?
Yeah, I would say that just in general, I'm a really big proponent of rotational programs. I know that the PAGE program is the one that is the most close to my heart for a variety of reasons. But I know that there are also rotational programs at like Paramount, I think has one. I think that we have one here at CBS. The agencies have one like UTA, CAA, all of them. But just in terms of what I learned from it, I think I learned a lot about what I wanted to do. If you couldn't tell already, I didn't really have a humongous idea of what I wanted to be in entertainment. It was more just that I wanted to be part of it. And I wanted to tell stories. But being in the PAGE program, I think, taught me a lot about how I could apply, the analytical skills that I had, whether it was the classes that I was in at Berkeley or even in high school, like looking back on my calc classes, it was just like, I never thought that I could tell a story with pivot tables. So being able to do that and learn that in a really real way, fresh out of college was great. And in terms of the rotations that I did, I worked in marketing on the digital distribution side, but I also worked in product, and I also worked in unscripted TV. So working in like reality TV shows was, first and foremost, that was really funny. That was really fun. But I think that I also learned a lot about just personalities, just in general. Like dealing with, one of the Real Housewives is something that, believe it or not, that's something that I take in my day to day. Whether it's working with talent or working with VPs that are, prima donnas. So I think that, all in all, rotational programs are great, and it's something that you should look into when you're wrapping up a UCI.
And again, just to echo off of Drew, we do have page programs at Paramount as well. I think they're structured a little different, but it's actually one of the best ways to get placed within a team or department, because for us, the pages will also fill in for any kind of temp or contract roles that are available. And a lot of my colleagues now that are in similar positions all started as pages. So again, yeah, it's a really great opportunity if you can take advantage.
Amazing. Thanks for you, both of you, for sharing those opportunities. I think I'll definitely keep an eye out for that because I didn't know those types of opportunities existed before. But now this question is for all of you guys. What's the most helpful piece of advice or skill that helped you guys get your foot in the door? And would you change anything about your career path? If so, why?
I'll go. I think I'm thinking about like earlier in my career, because I am still early in my career, let's be clear. But earlier in my career, I think what I watched a lot of people do was, I'll be honest, when I went to my first job at Lionsgate, I was like, this is not what I want to do for the rest of my life. And I knew I wanted to make a switch. And I was sort of given the advice that I should always be looking to learn, right? And especially early in my career, if you're fortunate enough, I wasn't necessarily always looking to make the next move for more money, right? It was always, is this pushing me in a direction that I think I want my career to go in? Or at least, if you don't even know that, is this an area of which I want to learn more, right? And that doesn't necessarily mean you need to gun for the big promotion. That doesn't mean you need to go to the other studio to do the same job, but for more money. But it could mean making a lateral move within the same company, making, around the same thing, but just to get exposure in a different area, right? I think there are so many different career opportunities within the industry that you really can jump around and try out different things for those first couple of years to get a basis for what you like. And then you can always choose a lane later, right? I've seen so many people make career pivots from outside the industry into the entertainment industry and vice versa. It really is never too late. But I would focus always on learning and where you think your passion lies, and sort of follow your gut in that direction.
Yeah, I would say for me, I think we talked about it earlier, like apply to as many places as possible. I can speak from experience when I was looking to go to the studio side after being at Think Jam for almost like 2.5 years. Within a 6-month period, I had 4 interviews at Disney, an interview at Netflix, I interviewed with CBS, I interviewed with Sony, with Universal, and Paramount was the first one to give me an offer. So even with someone that was I already had like 2.5 years of experience, it even was hard for me to get that offer. So I would say don't give up. Literally apply for anything that sounds even remotely exciting to you, because you honestly just never know where it will lead. So yeah, that would definitely be my advice, is to don't stop trying.
Yeah, so to kind of piggyback off of what has been said, I would say that the biggest advice that I got was from a mentor that told me to ask questions unabashedly. I think that there's a lot of anxiety and fear around looking dumb or looking stupid when it comes to asking questions once you're in the job. But I think that that shows so much perception in an individual to ask any sort of question. Obviously you want to be thoughtful about anything that you're going to be asking about, but I think that you can ultimately learn so much more when you're inquisitive about things in an organic way. And on top of that too, just asking questions of people to connect as well. Like it doesn't even always have to be job specific. If you see someone on LinkedIn, whether that's me or any of us up here, and you see that they're doing something or have done something that you're interested in, I think that you'd be really surprised at the amount of people that even outside of a COVID world, like in a regular world, are open to having a coffee. I've had multiple pastry chats with people that are just looking to hear about the Page program or about my time at Hulu, XYZ, whatever. So do that. And even in the current situation that we're in right now, reach out to people on LinkedIn, have a chat, have a call. And, I think that people will be friendlier than you think.
See, oh, Lillian, do you want to take it?
Oh, yeah, sure, I can. Awesome. Thank you guys so much for answering all our prepared panel questions. That's actually all that we prepared today. And we wanted to take this time to open up to the audience and ask them if they had any questions to ask you guys. So Jay, if you can start unspotlighting people so we can give you guys a chance to see who you're talking to this entire time. Yeah, so if anyone wants to ask a question, feel free to either send it in the chat or ideally unmute and talk to the speakers yourselves. We would love to hear from you guys.
Don't be shy.
Vivian, take it away.
Yeah, so thank you so much, Valerie, David, and Drew for coming in today. I had a really good time hearing about your guys' experiences and journeys about like how you ended up where you are today. And this question is kind of like a casual, fun question, but I'm really curious about like if you guys ever had the opportunity to meet or like work directly with any like famous celebrities or like actors and like such like, like I think it'd be like a cool question, but totally okay if you guys don't have those experiences too. I'm just really curious.
I think the marketing people have better answers than I do, I'm sure.
I have my favorite experience at Paramount. It's a little bit of a story, but so when I first started at Paramount in like July 2019, it was my second day of work, or no, it was my first day of work, and my boss was like, "Oh, this is what we're doing tomorrow. Tomorrow you're taking Will Smith around the lot, and you're gonna shoot some content with him." And I was like, oh, "Okay, cool, yeah." And then that was July 2019, and then flash forward to September, we're working on a movie called Gemini Man starring Will Smith. And it was a Friday morning at like 10 a.m. and my boss comes into my office and she's like, "Oh, you're going to Budapest tomorrow with Will." And I was like, "You didn't even ask me if I had a passport, but okay." So I canceled my plans for the next 10 days. The next day I hopped on a plane. I went to Hungary. I was with Will there for about a week, and it was for the premiere of the film. So the global premiere of the film was happening in Budapest because the film shot in Budapest. And we got to bring in 3 different sets of influencers. So the first set of influencers were 6 content creators from around the world that got to shoot custom content with Will to post on his channels. They each got 20-minute time slots. We also launched Will on his TikTok channel from that event. And then the second group of influencers were 15 international lifestyle general entertainment influencers, where we set up a scavenger hunt essentially around Budapest where they got to go to filming locations. We got to do stunts that you saw in the trailer. So we took a speedboat down the Danube River. They did some like bungee jumping activations with the stunt coordinators. And then they got to end it with a meet and greet with Will, and he took selfies with all of them, and it was great. And then the last group of influencers, it just so happened that the night of the movie premiere was Will's 51st birthday. So he wanted to do a concert as the after party for the premiere. So it was Will and DJ Jazzy Jeff. I don't know if any of you guys have seen The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Yeah, but as the opening acts, they also wanted influencers to come and kind of get the crowd pumped up. So we had a group of street dancers from France come in who got to get the crowd going. And then we also brought in a DJ from Singapore. So that's actually where I got my first TV credit because they aired it as an MTV special. But yeah, we even got to order Will's room service at one point. So yeah.
I don't think either of us are going to top that one.
Yeah, it is kind of a crazy story. So
You're wild, man. That's crazy.
Yeah.
In terms of for me, when I was a page, I had a handful of run-ins with a couple of different people. I don't know if you guys are Clay Aiken fans at all, but he was pitching to us a show when I was at Esquire Network, RIP Esquire. And he told us that he was a really big fan of American Ninja Warriors. So naturally, the next sequence in that would be for me to take him to American Ninja Warrior shoot at 2 or 3 in the morning on the lot. That was a lot of fun. And, it was tough for me. I'm not the type of person that's willing to stay up that late normally. So, talking to him about his music, and like, to be real with you, I didn't know a ton about his music at the time. So I was just like, yeah, I love all of your albums. Those are amazing. So going through that was really funny. I had like half of a day with Vin Diesel one time on the Universal lot just to chat with him about the ride that was actually coming up, which was funny. He's like as short as you think he is, which was hilarious. At Hulu, I worked with Mindy a couple of times from the Mindy Project, and
Just Mindy, no last name. Just
never
Mindy.
ever,
Yeah.
never ever. And yeah, working with her on sponsored content was funny in that she was pretty much down to do whatever we were looking to do, and I think that Valerie can probably relate in that that's not the case for everybody. So being able to do that with someone that's as big as her was awesome. And you know, I've seen a handful of other people in the office here and there, but nothing as interesting as any of those.
I don't have any stories nearly as interesting. My job is not talent facing whatsoever. What I will say is, I'm sure Drew and Valerie more so than I'm used to. Like, there's talent walking through the office all the time, and it's not a big deal, right? I mean, to like a couple people it might be because it's like their favorite person or whatever. It's no big deal. But I have never seen the office like go down in craziness over one piece of talent, which was Grumpy Cat. When Grumpy Cat came into the office, people were freaking out, like giggling in the hallways, running upstairs. And I was like, what? Who's here? What is happening? Is it like Jennifer Lawrence? Is it whatever? No, it was a cat. And so, and I went upstairs. I was like, all right, guess I gotta look at this cat. We went upstairs, and everyone was posing pictures for it. They were super nice, like the handlers were super nice, but it was the most bizarre, like, wow, this is the one that we all collectively freak out and, get rid of our professional demeanor for the cat, which was pretty funny, actually. That was some time ago. I think that cat is now RIP, unfortunately, but Grumpy Cat, the biggest piece of talent to walk through the office amongst Lionsgate staff, at least.
Amazing. I feel like I had just my jaw open for all of your answers. Every person was so cool, especially Grumpy Cat. Can't believe that that's the biggest piece of talent to walk through the office. But yeah, I loved hearing about all your anecdotes. Our next question is from Alvin. He said, thank you everyone for coming and all the great insight that you've given us so far. I'd love to know, what are some things that you regret / wish you did in college? This can be professional, personal, anything like that.
Yeah, I'm not a big believer in regrets, but one actually big regret. So I was at UC Irvine, as you guys know. I was an RA for 2 of those years, my 3rd and 4th year in Middle Earth, and then in Campus Village, if Campus Village still exists. If it does, they should tear it down. I think my biggest regret is not studying abroad. Honestly, it was always one of those things where it's like, okay, I have these classes, I have to finish these series or whatever, but it was one of those things where I should have just taken the summer out and done it and like screw the internship, or like figured I would take summer courses in lieu of missing that quarter or two during the year or something like that. But that's probably my biggest regret during college.
Totally agree with that. I think for me, it's kind of related to it. I know that I did all of my internships out here in Orange County and in LA. I would say for me, I wish I would have done an internship out in like in New York or in Chicago or something, just because like, if I'm being real with myself, I think that I'll probably always be an LA boy. But doing an internship out there in a different city, in a different place, for one, could have, increased my network out there. But for two, I would have been able to experience something at like a pretty low stakes, low risk environment, right? Like, not to take away from what you're doing as an intern, but you can kind of wing it, right? And doing that in a different city and seeing that through those sorts of eyes would have been awesome for sure.
Yeah, what David said, I actually did study abroad, so I would highly recommend that you guys all do that. But I would say my regret from college is perhaps not doing more internships. I think now that I'm someone that interviews for intern applicants, I see like the crazy amount of opportunities that you guys have already had at like tons of different studios, tons of different companies. So I think I regret not doing more internships back then, because I just feel like now everyone has like 5 or 6 as a baseline before they're even applying for jobs after grad.
Thanks for all your answers. Next, Brett asked,
Oh wait,
what would
do you want to add in anything?
Sorry, what was that, Matt?
Did you want to add anything? I think we skipped you.
Oh, all good. I had my chat in about internships in Chi-Town, and that's the main gist of it. And I guess aside from that too, just make sure you're enjoying your college years too, right? There's going to be an unlimited amount of time to work as hard as the three of us do. But you'll never get your college time back. So love your classmates, and I'm sure they'll be successful too, and you guys can all network together that way.
Life will never be the same. No, I'm kidding. But yeah, for sure. Enjoy the years. It's I had a lot of fun in college, and like, you guys, I was very worried coming out of college, especially graduating when I did in 2009. There weren't many jobs, and a lot of those last couple months at UCI were spent under stress of like, am I going to find a job? Feeling like I was a failure if I didn't graduate with a full-time offer, et cetera, right? It'll work out. You guys joining this panel in and of itself shows that you are sort of already taking initiative, right, in terms of understanding what career path you want to go, and you just enjoy your time there while you have it, honestly.
Definitely. Sorry about that, Drew, but thank you all for your words of wisdom. We all appreciate it, especially since, everything's 2020 in retrospect. So love that insight. Our next question is from Brett, who said, what would you say is the difference between working in television, movies, music, etc.?
David, do you want to start?
I have never worked in anywhere aside from movies. Television. So my counterparts in television do a lot more of the same roles. It's just different economics. So it really depends on where you are. The music industry is such a different beast than I would say the film to entertainment industry, right? And I actually have very little to zero connections in the entertainment industry. In the music industry. I almost consider it a completely separate industry from film and entertainment, right? Although a lot of the companies own the same big record labels that you hear about, it operates so separately. Like, for example, Universal, right? We were just talking about the Universal a lot. Universal Music is down the street from my office in Santa Monica. Universal Studios is exactly where you think it is. It's at Universal Studios, right? In a big building in the Valley in Burbank. So it is on two different parts of town and operates so separately. I couldn't even speak for it. But I would say, TV has experienced quite a bit of growth over the last couple of years in terms of, the entrance of streamers, and really with Netflix starting with creating original series, and everyone now kind of starting their own streaming services, creating original series. So there's been a huge boom, and we talk a lot about the golden age of television. I think the same now is starting to happen for film as well, where you now see a lot more of these streamers developing original content for their own platforms. And that boom I'm seeing already coming down the pipeline in terms of both the value of content and for opportunities for career paths as well. Sorry, I can't really say the difference. I've only ever worked in film. Anyone else?
I can't talk at all about music, but I can touch quickly on just digital marketing for TV and film. I mean, I worked on the 300th episode of Grey's Anatomy, and that episode was done in like 2 weeks. Whereas now I'm working on movies that are coming out in 2023. So while for film, we have a 2-year head start on some things, I would say TV, you're working on like 5 times the amount of content in a way shorter window. So the turnaround is definitely much quicker in TV. And I'm sure Drew can speak to that as well, just because he's in TV now.
Yeah, I would say that the way that it was posed to me when I first started my career was that TV is like the quarter system and films are like the semester. You have a little bit more time when you're working on films, but at the end of the day, you're always going to be doing the same amount of work when it comes to campaigns, right? But that said, with TV, I think that you get to have a new day every day, and that's not to say that that's not the case for films. But when you're working on a daily, like if I'm working with Corden from day to day, Monday is going to be different from Tuesday, it can be different from Wednesday. And, if you're looking for that sort of turnover and a blank slate from day to day, I think that TV is the way to go, just because you have, so many different ideas and so many different content pieces that you can touch on. Whereas if you're working on a movie, obviously you're going to blow it out a ton for the idea that you have. But, that's really the end all be all of your day, which, if you have the extra time to hit that semester final, then that's great. You can kill it on that final. But, if that's not for you, it's not for you.
Definitely. Our next question is from Ali or Ali. They said, I graduated from UCI with a major in biology. I'm interested in becoming a screenwriter and eventually director. I don't have anything related to the movie industry on my resume or any connections. How do I get in?
I would say that one of my best friends' girlfriends actually is in a similar situation to you, and she actually went to UCI as well. And what she has done is pretty much done anything that she can do to get her foot in the door in entertainment. She's in operations now. That's obviously a far cry from script writing, but I think that being adjacent to that sort of world at all will give you a lot of visibility into what you can do from day to day. And on top of that, also just keep writing, like on the side for me, obviously I'm a marketer by day and not Batman by night. I'm a writer by night. So working on your scripts and working on your craft, I think that's really important. Make your blog, make your Tumblr, if that's still a thing. Not sure if that still is. But if you can get people to read what you're writing, and if you're good enough, then your voice is going to be heard. So don't worry about the connections. Focus on your craft, polish your voice, and grab a coffee with me, and we'll make something work for you.
Drew's gonna greenlight your movie. I mean, I don't have too much to add. I don't know, Valerie. What I will say is I know a lot of people who've made career switches from different industries I talked about before, right? I know investment bankers who decided 3-4 years into it who were like, this is not the life for me, and didn't pivot into a job like mine that's more, finance business oriented. Went and started working as the assistant to a creative executive at a studio, right? And those jobs are hard to come by, but it is, again, like I said, never too late to make a pivot. But I encourage you, if that's a direction you want to go in. Honestly, no one has asked me what I majored in college in like 11 years, and I've only been working in my professional life for about 11 years. So it really doesn't matter. A lot of people come from all over the place and all walks of life to sort of get their foot into the entertainment industry. So I wouldn't worry too much about applicable skill sets at this point. And like Drew said, work on your craft, network, and keep pushing your way in.
Yeah, I don't have what I majored in on my resume. I even don't put my graduation year because I don't want people to know how young I am. So yeah, nobody cares what you majored in, at least in entertainment.
That's great to hear. I think that definitely even helped me. So I know our audience members definitely found it helpful as well. Our next 2 questions are actually directed at Valerie, and I'll ask them one by one. So the first one says, hi, Valerie, it's from Amanda. If I remember correctly, I know one of your tasks is dealing with 70 other market resources or market sources outside from US and Canada and making sure they're operating correctly on the exterior side. How do you manage such a high amount of sources outside and deal with them in an organizational and efficient way?
Yeah, it is a lot. Like we had 72 markets release the Quiet Place 2 trailer we put out last week. So it definitely is a lot when you're dealing with like localization and remembering timelines, and different territories have different holidays than we do. I primarily work with the top 12 markets. So, like Mexico, Brazil, UK, France, Italy, Germany, Spain, China, Australia, Korea, and Japan. So that definitely helps more that I'm really only dealing with the top 12. But when we do have larger launches like a trailer, my inbox is flooded on a daily basis with questions. So I live off of Google Docs. I have Bibles for every title, with like trailer plans for every market. I have like distro lists for all of the markets. So it is a lot of organization and staying on top of your emails, because if one question slips, that one country may not end up launching a trailer because I wasn't able to answer their question on time. So definitely organization. And then 2, it is a little bit of time management, just realizing like in the morning is your best time to have meetings with Europe, afternoon is when you can schedule with LATAM. Obviously APAC is asleep for your whole day until the end of the day. So I think managing my calendar around that as well definitely helps. So I stick to the 9 to 6 for, as much as I can. But it is, being super organized and staying on top of emails. My goal every day is to like get to inbox 0, although it rarely happens. Yeah.
Awesome. And the next question we have for you is from Courtney. She said, you mentioned working with many international markets, and I was wondering if you could share a little bit more about how someone can get their foot in the door for such a niche position and what kind of skills are preferred. Thank you.
Yeah, a lot of the studios at least have international teams. It is changing a little bit where some teams are going global, but for the most part, almost every single studio has an international team. Within the different territories, there are local offices. So like Mexico has a local office, the UK has a local office. So there are opportunities within local offices as well as home office. That's what we're called in LA. But I would just say being open again to like knowing different cultures. I think if you've traveled a lot, it definitely helps because that helps, you know, when you're creating marketing materials and knowing again what you can and can't do for certain territories. You're not expected to know every language. I certainly don't. We do all of our business in English for the most part. But yeah, I would just say keeping an eye on what's happening with entertainment around the world. You know, there's our territories also have local movies that they distribute outside of the ones that we produce from the US. So I think knowing that is great. And then for me, I didn't have any international experience before this position. So again, like what I said before, just apply to anything that sounds remotely interesting. And it really is just like fake it until you make it. And I feel like if you're a fast learner and willing to, you know, put in the extra time, you can excel in any new job that you apply for.
Thanks for all of your advice, Valerie. We definitely appreciated it. And now I think Jay has one directed towards David and Drew.
Hi, thank you guys so much. Thank you, Val, Drew, and David. It was great, amazing hearing kind of your perspective within your role. And I just wanted to have a quick question for David and Drew. So do you have any tips for students or prospective students who are looking to kind of transition from within an agency to kind of companies such as Paramount, like Lionsgate and CBS? Is there anything that we could do to kind of get that position? And also, I have a follow-up question for David. I was wondering, as a current strategy and operations, kind of as a planning and strategy, sorry, as a current business strategy and planning at Lionsgate, you also kind of work within the operations. What would be kind of like the main aspect of operations that you would look for within kind of maybe like entry-level positions, but also any kind of student that is looking to do it operations as well?
I can definitely answer the agency question first. I think that the biggest thing to emphasize for you, if you have agency experience already, is to, kind of touch on what Valerie was talking about earlier. You're kind of already in the weeds of so much of what needs to be done in terms of the actual work. So emphasize that sort of work experience in terms of your interview, in terms of your application, in terms of your essay, just because it is. I think that you'll be able to see that like, hey, I have actual familiarity with what you guys are project managing out to different agencies. So being able to lean on that and, obviously network as much as you can. At the end of the day, like I mentioned before, reach out to people on LinkedIn, talk to them about what you've done and where you're going. And, I think if you've got the skills to earn the bills, you'll be able to get the job.
Yeah, I think I'd build on that and talk about, direct experience and applicable experience are two very different things. And if you don't find reading job descriptions that you feel like you have the direct experience needed, applicable experience and being able to tie and tailor your resume toward each job that you're looking for, and finding a way through your words of tying what you have done to how it could then fit into the job that you're looking at is very important, right? It's always very clear to me when we're looking at resumes of who is sending out generic things and who is like, oh, they looked at this job and they want this job, right? And it's very clear when you're sifting through these things. And unfortunately, you don't get to always meet the human behind that piece of paper, that PDF that gets sent to you. So I would personalize it as much as possible and humanize yourself as much as possible, because it's hard when you're sifting through dozens of pieces of paper that or PDFs that you forget that there's like a person behind here. What was the second question? I forget. I'm sorry.
No, of course. So as a currently I am looking to do as an operations kind of as a prospective operations role, like for full time, as currently as you're working within kind of strategy and operations, do you have any kind of tips that you could provide in terms of like what skill set would be the most important, the most transferable skills, and what kind of would be the main most important aspect that you look for these kind of entry level positions?
Yeah, I think especially early in the career, finance, strategy, operations can mean a lot of the same thing at a studio, right? And so for entry level jobs here, I think it is sort of your classic financial analyst sort of roles. What they're looking for really, you don't have to be an accountant, you don't have to have your CPA. But I think working with big sets of numbers and being able to tell a story through a big data set, right? People get very intimidated by big spreadsheets of information in general, right? It doesn't even have to be numbers. And how can you distill that into something that is easy to read and something that someone can get clear takeaways from, right? That's always the biggest challenge, especially for the roles that are actually generating these reports, right? And a big skill set that you'll be learning in those first few years in your career, right? How to speak to executives that don't have as much time, right? And what are the big takeaways, right? Being able to, one, be in every single detail, but on the flip side, take a minute, take a step back and understand where that big picture is. I think that that's a huge thing that people are always being pushed to look at earlier in their career, so that they can do their jobs better for the people who they're working for, and also develop a skill set for when they're future executives as well.
Great. Thank you so much for that, guys.
Awesome. And moving on to our last question of the night for our open Q&A. Faith asked, I was wondering what kind of experience you all gained in undergrad, what types of internships, clubs, or leadership helped you to break into the entertainment industry / get where you are now?
I can start. Most of my experiences in college revolved around events. So I interned Vans US Open of Surfing right in Huntington Beach and put on that whole event. I also interned with IMG, and they're the company that puts on Fashion Week. I also interned for the NFL Pro Bowl draft because they did that out in Hawaii. I think you guys have one. I used to be the Victoria's Secret campus rep for my school. So I did that. And then the last internship I had in college was with a marketing agency. So super similar to Think Jam, except instead of entertainment studios, all their clients were out in Hawaii and they were all like tourism travel based. So like Hawaiian Airlines, the Hawaiian Tourism Board, Sheraton Waikiki, so that's kind of how I got my general marketing experience. So again, I feel like that kind of just reiterates, like, you can have any kind of background and experience as long as you can show that you're really interested in something and that you're really passionate about something. I think what, for me personally, I don't know about you, David and Drew, but I live and breathe entertainment. I'm subscribed to all of all the streamers. When COVID wasn't a thing, I was at the movies like 2 to 3 times a week. So I truly don't feel like it's a job. And I think if you're able to show that, even if you don't have the experience, it can go a long way.
Yeah, I can go next. So for me, I would say, I think the biggest priority for me, especially as a college student, was just to write as much as I could. Obviously, I use that voice a lot in the marketing materials that I make from day to day, but it was a big priority of mine to, be able to tell people like, hey, I'm a journalist. Like, was I writing for the New York Times? No. But, being able to understand what my vision is for myself for, everything, whether I was writing about soccer, whether I was writing about Childish Gambino, whoever it was, that was really important for me. But the other side of that coin as well was fine tuning my sort of analytical background, and I got that through my marketing internships. And I think that we've talked a lot about having an internship at a studio, at an agency, wherever. But I think that you can also get an internship at a small local publication. My first internship was for a publisher called i5. They had a magazine called Dog Fancy and Cat Fancy. So nothing humongous, but I was able to take so many of those skills from that to NBC and to CBS, to Hulu, wherever, just because marketing is marketing at the end of the day, right? Like, you're going to have more money sometimes, but those principles are those principles. And, any sort of experience that you can get that relates to what you're going to be doing from day to day is a good experience. So get that through your internships, get that through your clubs, write as much as you can if you're looking to write, and, go from there.
Yeah, I'll add on to that. I'll be honest, I didn't actually do too many internships during my undergrad. I spent most of my summers as a lifeguard at the Ark, so they paid well. I think we focused a lot on hard skills during this panel. I think one thing that can't be missed is our soft skills, right? And I think some of the skills I learned as an RA during college, dealing with multiple and dozens of personalities at one time. I'm sure Valerie and Drew can attest even more than I can. There are a lot of personalities that you need to manage in your professional career, especially if you're going to be talent facing, right? Understanding how to de-escalate situations, understanding how to escalate situations, understanding how to work your network and create a network of colleagues, right? And work as a team. I think that's actually one of the more applicable skill sets I took away from just being an RA, because I knew I did not want to work in campus housing for the rest of my life. So that's for sure. I think remember that you are going in as part of a team member, and think about who your superiors are and looking for support in your career growth, right? I've been very fortunate to have some great bosses, and specifically one great boss that I've worked for the last 9 years, right? I think I've seen other people who've had terrible ones and who are not supportive of their growth. And you should recognize that from the start, right? Your boss can be your mentor as well. And look for that person who cares about you first as a human being, and two, about your learning and growth going forward.
Thank you all for all of that insight. And again, for a wonderful night of just amazing answers, anecdotes, and all that jazz. I definitely learned a lot, and I know our audience members did. So before we wrap up the night, Jay, you want to take a